For the past few years, I've been more and more intertwined and in communication with anarchs. There were always younger idealists who would use catchphrases and anarcho buzzwords that made zero sense to someone older with more years of political, psychological, and economic studies. It doesn't mean I dismiss the concept entirely, it means I remain unconvinced by the evidence presented, much like God. Also, if you can't clearly explain it so the average person can understand it, all the strong feelings and protests will get you nowhere. I hadn't bothered to dig too deeply into anarchy, mostly because of the people that I knew that were into it. Nice people, but seemed to be rather clueless on how the world works. Kind of the reason I never bothered to read Harry Potter back in college. Everyone I knew who listed it as their favorite book in their MySpace page either listed only that and Dan Brown or some other book with no intellectual depth at the time. Or that was the only book they liked. Several years ago I listened to the Communist Manifesto, which you can find on LibriVox, and then Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of America. Both were very right, but with some flaws and biases. Zinn was admittedly biased, but very, very eye-opening. Marx, on the other hand, never had Gandhi or MLK as examples on nonviolent revolution, as the manifesto was written right before the American Civil War, and only had the French and American revolutions as examples, which became the dogma of the 1900s communists, creating power vacuums and brute force by communist dictators, calling the brutal violence the never-ending revolution. He also didn't stress enough the concepts of the Bill of Rights and freedoms in his works, viewing them as obviously just a given of the communist ideals, which Marx did believe in, so they never made it into the 1900s communist dogma, ensuring all communist nations were brutal dictatorships that suppressed freedom, except for Chile, which could have been a model communism, but America helped hand it brutally over to Pinochet, who became a poster child for the ideal right-libertarian free-market Austrian school dictatorship which Milton Friedman idealized so much. Lastly, as no one had a welfare state at the time, the manifesto idealized the idea of the state replacing the markets, which led to a lot of people not questioning the state. This helped to reinforce the brutality of the state as good and necessary. This last part is what anarchists most rallied against in terms of their split from the communists, though for most of the late 1800s and early 1900s, still clung to the idealism of violent revolution. Just this year, I finally ran across some people who could explain most of it to me rationally. First was Awesomerants, who convinced me that as a philosophy, anarchy is a good philosophy to follow, and is essential as a skeptic to have. The point is that all authorities have to provide sufficient evidence to hold the power they hold over an area of life. Thom Avella I made a video about anarchy as a political system, and I'm still only 75% in agreement, either because they're too vague about the mechanisms of it, or because it's still an over-idealistic hypothesis that its believers desperately want to believe, as it feels so good and perfectly just. I also watched Tom's recommended video, and that was vaguer still, about how a stateless society would work, and seems as if a math formula with a stage that says magic happens here, and the formula is solved. And it is because of this that I ignored anarchy as a viable option of government for so long. I will respond to him in 2 more parts this week to keep it concise and brief per sitting. Maybe he can fill in the gaps that I have. I hope you enjoy it.